My favorite person who I photographed. Well, it runs a spectrum from nobodies to somebodies. Um, I love the nobodies just as much as, perhaps more so than the somebodies. But if I had to pick the two people who I held in a very special esteem, uh, that would probably be Joe Frazier and Arthur Schlesinger Jr. Two total different types. Um, Incredible individuals, incredible set of circumstances. I went to photograph Arthur Schlesinger Jr. for Stern Magazine. It was the anniversary of the Berlin Wall, which Jack Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, they had been involved in, and at that time Arthur Schlesinger was their secretary. And he's now perhaps thought of as the secretary slash historian of that era. I was amazed when I went into the room. There were two of us, one journalist and one photographer. We made the decision beforehand that the writer would do the interview first, and then I would do the photograph, so that we would each have separate but equal time, which worked out very well. When I entered the room, it was just amazing. It was amazing because it had such a beautiful view of Bryant Park, the Empire State Building. But it was also fascinating because it was a large room, and Schlesinger had a way of piling books vertically. He had no bookshelves. There were no bookshelves on the wall. Instead, there were vertical piles going up as high as 5 feet of one book on top of the other, on top of the other. And it took me at least 30 minutes to clear out all these books so I could get him near the window to take his portrait. He had these two beautiful black Bauhaus era chairs. You would never know they were Bauhaus chairs because they were stacked and covered with books. His desk, also, the front portion of his desk was 6 feet long, piled with books. I photographed him through there. He was a small, frail, delicate kind of guy. And the books were just going up, sort of like the stalactites of New York City. These were the stalactites of knowledge for Schlesinger. And behind them, pinned up on the wall really loosely and without much care or concern, were notes from Jack Kennedy, notes from Bobby Kennedy and Ted Kennedy. Part of his youth was right there, just pinned up with a push pin. And for me, it was quite fabulous. He was a kind, considerate, patient person, relaxed. The second, of course, is Joe Frazier. I had the opportunity to photograph Joe Frazier or Buckminster Fuller on the same day, and I chose Joe Frazier. I chose Joe Frazier because I had always liked boxing, and I had always liked Joe Frazier. And so I went down to North Philadelphia started making my way to his gym. I was the only white guy around. Everybody would look at me and they would wonder, what this white boy, he's lost. He doesn't know where he's going. But, I knew exactly where I was going. And I went into the gym, and as soon as I come into the gym, I introduced myself to these three guys. At the time, Joe's son was working out with a rope. And so I introduced myself to these three guys, and I said told them my name, and I'm here to do an interview with Joe and do Joe's portrait. And they said, "Oh, well, that's great. That's just great. Yeah, Joe's right straight back there, through the door, and you just go through the door, keep going back, and then make a right." So I said thank you. I was young, and I went back there, went through the door, made a right, and I noticed it was warm. It was very warm. And then I made that right, and then it became warm, but it was also humid. And I had my cameras and my strobes, and I'm carrying this stuff, and I'm going down this hallway, and it's dark, and it's warm, it's humid. And then I turn the corner, and there's Joe. He's standing there looking at me, and I'm standing there looking at him. But the difference was, Joe was completely naked. He just came out of the shower. And I was speechless. I didn't know what to say. I only knew not to look down. Whatever I do, don't look down. I noticed right away the scars on his face and the size of his neck. But I didn't look down. And I told him who I was, and he knew who I was. He saw the camera, and he knew that I was coming. And but neither one of us could say anything. It was a very awkward moment. So what happened is that I went out, and he asked me, "Well, you know what? Go out into the office and sit down." And so I did. I said, "That's a good idea. That's a good idea." So I went out to the office and I sat down, and those three guys down below, they're down there laughing. It was a joke at my expense. And so at any rate, I'm sitting in the office, and every once in a while, Joe would stick his head out around the corner. He would just stick his head out. And I kept thinking, oh, this is not going to happen. I mean, this is not going to happen. So I kept thinking, well, what can I do, or this or that? And instead, Joe finally comes out around the corner in a two-piece suit. When Joe Frazier wears a two-piece suit, it kind of looks like he's wearing leotards, because his legs are so thick, his neck is so thick, his arms are big. And basically, it looks like it was painted on him. It didn't look like he was actually. So he said to me, well, John, do you drink? And I said, yes. I would say anything at that point. If he asked me to smoke a joint, I would say yes. So I said, yes, I drink. And he said, well, what would you like to have? And I remember at that time, he was doing these Schmitz commercials. So I said, well, let's have a Schmitz. And he said, that's terrible beer. I wouldn't even drink it. And so he goes back, and he gets a couple drinks, and he brings them out, and we... I think it was something like Budweiser. But at any rate, the drinking and the beer, having the beer and talking relaxed him. And at that point, I said, well, why don't we just take that picture now? And he said, sure. So he wasn't quite finished with one of his beers. I was setting up my lights and everything, and he just tosses down the beer, and he didn't want to get up from the couch. So he took the beer can between his hands and he squashed it into a small little thing like this. Then he stuffed it back behind a pillow so that no one would see it. He wouldn't have to get up and put it in the garbage. He just put it back behind the thing. But it's one of those little stories that no one knows about the photograph. No one knows that these things actually, the stories that wrap around the photographs, whether it's the little handwritten notes from Bobby Kennedy or the beer can stuffed back by, there is a lot more. People look at the image and they say, oh wow, that's a beautiful image, but people really don't know that I was in the locker room with this guy and he was naked, and I was paranoid about looking down, or being in Schlesinger's office was a treat because I had never seen an office like that. I mean, it was spectacular. And I myself, after the Schlesinger shoot, I became a very minimalist, but when I pile books, I pile them vertically. But I do have bookshelves.